Hello, I'm Dr Simone Silver. I'm a functional medicine doctor practicing in Cape Town, and I have a very special interest in hormonal health and wellness. So a woman's journey into her senescence or into her menopausal time, which is the time where the ovaries really stop working, is preceded by the perimenopausal time, which can happen 10 years before the menopausal transition. And then the second part of that is actually transitioning into menopause, which is a time where the ovaries are no longer producing any hormones. And then after that, we would find ourselves in what we term the post-menopausal years. So let's start with the perimenopausal years, because they precede the menopause by as much as 15 years before we actually make the transition into menopause. So we can start actually going into our perimenopausal years even in our late 30s, but certainly towards our early 40s. It's an incredibly turbulent time, and I feel like credit isn't given to what perimenopausal women actually go through, because it is a hugely challenging time, and most of us really don't understand all the changes and flux that's happening in the body. So what's really happening is, as we age, as we head into our early 40s, the ability of the ovaries to produce ripe, mature eggs starts to wane. We're getting a bit older, and consequently, we cannot make enough progesterone levels, or the same progesterone levels that we used to make in our 20s. So we start to see this hormonal pattern really develop in perimenopause, which looks like a steady, slow decline of progesterone and quite a fluctuant, turbulent estrogen level. And of course, this hormonal pattern is associated with so many symptoms. So the loss of progesterone has an incredible impact on how we feel. Progesterone in the female brain is incredibly calming. It supports the production of a very important neurochemical called GABA. GABA keeps us calm, it helps us focus, it helps us sleep at night. So when we lose our progesterone, we often develop symptoms like insomnia or a sense of anxiety, not feeling in control anymore. We may even feel like our thinking becomes quite scattered and we don't focus as well as we should. In addition to that, as progesterone levels are declining, we may also see changes in our menstrual cycles. In the early perimenopausal years, which are usually in our late 30s to early 40s, because estrogen levels can be quite fluctuant and sometimes very high, we often have quite heavy periods. We may have more spotting or bleeding in between periods, breast tenderness, PMS symptoms may become really magnified, cravings, bloating, mood changes, all of these things may dominate. Later on, as we head into our late 40s and estrogen levels start to slowly decline, as we approach the menopausal transition, we often see changes in menstrual cycles that are, they become lighter, they may become infrequent or further and further apart, and they may also stop and start altogether. When estrogen starts to decline, so as we really start to approach that menopausal transition where the ovaries are no longer working, but just before we get there, when hormone levels are sort of petering out, that's when we can also start to develop symptoms like hot flushes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, depression, and memory changes as well. So really the perimenopause is it's really a process that happens over many years. It's not an event, it's an ongoing process of change, and it's almost setting the stage for this final act, which is the menopausal transition. And at that time, the ovaries finally stop working or are unable to produce hormones anymore, and then we go into the menopausal period. So the medical definition of menopause makes me chuckle a little bit because it's quite scientific, and it says a woman should not have a menstrual period for 12 consecutive months, and then yes, you can wear this badge of menopause. But the reality is we don't wait for 12 months to pass before we should be looking for treatment or support, because in this time we're going through a whole flux of symptoms. And again, the medical definition denotes that it's some kind of event that happens and then we past it. And it's really not. It's a process, it's a journey. Once we head into the menopausal space or time, we are then no longer able to produce our two primary female sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, and there can be a whole number of symptoms that come with that. So the first ones that come to mind quite obviously would be the night sweats and the hot flushes and changes in sleep patterns, and vaginal dryness, even bladder symptoms, leaky bladder. But what's so important to realize is the loss of these hormones actually changes so much more in the body. Our hormones regulate functions from the top of our head to the tips of our toes. You name it, and hormones have a function to or a role to play somewhere in there. So common symptoms as well, changes in skin. Estrogen improves collagen production in the skin. It keeps our skin hydrated and elastic. So when we lose it during menopause, we can sometimes have wrinkling or fine lines that start to develop, dryness of the skin, dryness of the eyes as well. Mood. The mood changes that we go through during perimenopause and menopause are immense and often really undervalued. They can be immense and really affect our function and how we feel. And this is because there's a really strong and very well described link between hormones and neurochemicals. So estrogen in particular is quite closely connected to serotonin in the brain. And serotonin is our neurochemical of inner joy and spark. It helps us feel connected to the world around us. It helps us connect to feelings of compassion to other people. So a lot of the time when women are going through major hormone changes, they may not feel actually completely depressed, but there may be softer signs of neurochemical imbalance, like I just don't have my spark anymore, or, like after a day with the kids and my friend's phoning me up at night and she's telling me her problems and I just don't have the capacity to feel patient and tolerant and really hear her out. It can also present as just an irritability or feeling easily triggered. Small things feel like a really big deal somehow. We also lose during menopause another very important hormone that's often not spoken about, and that's testosterone, which is a male type hormone. But actually as women, we do need testosterone. We need it in the right amount, so too much is not a good thing, but also living with testosterone deficiency is not a good thing. Testosterone also affects the female brain in terms of how we feel. So it's quite connected to the neurochemical dopamine, which gives us vigor, drive. It gets us up and going in the morning, excited about our lives, ready to do our thing. And it also helps us with cognition and memory. Testosterone also is responsible for building lean muscle mass in the body and mobilizing or burning off excess fat. So the loss of testosterone is also implicated in all the weight changes that we see during the menopausal years. So it's a really common experience for perimenopausal and menopausal women to just feel so angry and not understand why. Suddenly they're hating husbands and just angry with the world. And it's a really important emotion to own and understand, because there's certainly a huge hormonal influence. You know, hormones really are a lens through which we look at the world and ourselves. So the loss of estrogen and progesterone really changes the way neurochemicals are produced in the brain. So if we lose all the good calming neurochemicals like serotonin and GABA, we're far more easily triggered. We're far less able to regulate ourselves and maintain perhaps a healthy level, a healthy perspective, really. In addition to that, I think the underlying reason behind this rage or anger is that we just don't have buffer anymore. So from an emotional capacity point of view, hormones really do allow us to feel like we've got buffer, like we've got reserve, like we've got capacity. And when that's gone as well, and we're quite tired, we're far more easily triggered. We just really have to draw the line in the sand because there's really not a lot of energy or capacity for things like patience and maybe libido or motivation. So I actually tell my patients all the time that things like having a lot of patience and having a lot of motivation and having libido are luxury spends. So you've got to have a lot of money in the bank to be able to buy those things. And if we are hormonally quite deficient and we're stressed, so our fuel tanks are quite empty, it's like having 10 Rand in the bank. What are you going to spend it on? It's not going to be libido, and it's not going to be being really patient. You're going to spend on the necessities. You're going to spend on just getting through your day. So menopause, how long does it last for? So if we go back to the perimenopausal time, perimenopause can last anywhere between 10 and 15 years before menopause. I know, it's like we really have quite a long hormonal journey to navigate as women. When we actually go through the menopausal transition, that can take anywhere between a year or two. And once we've entered menopause and the ovaries no longer work, we can't go back. So basically, we are then in menopause forevermore. After a year or so of being in menopause, we start to talk about the post-menopausal years, which then really continue on forever. So I really do believe that even though menopause is experienced as such a challenging time, and there's a lot of emotional apprehension about it, uncertainty, fear about it, I think it can be an incredible time of transformation and rebirth. One of the great positives about menopause is that for once in our lives, our hormone levels are stable in that they're low. There are symptoms associated with that, but if we, for example, replace those hormones, for the first time in our lives, we actually can experience what a smooth hormonal journey can feel like. Conversely, the perimenopausal years are far more turbulent. So I think sometimes going through those turbulent waters and then finally reaching menopause can feel like you're finally getting to a bit of a clear lake with calm. So there is definitely hope. I think the second thing is to really understand that we can be in control of the menopausal journey. So we don't need to be a slave to all these symptoms. We can get great knowledge. We can explore great tools to manage the symptoms, to support our bodies. Some of those tools may include looking at hormonal therapies, and some may include looking at non-hormonal therapies. And that's a journey and an exploration that every woman should really embark on. But it is absolutely possible to have a calmer, more contained, more controlled experience of menopause physically. And then on an emotional level, I really see this all the time, and I find it very beautiful that it can be such a time of rebirth and transformation. Women are given this wonderful opportunity to redefine themselves during menopause It's a very interesting phase of life. In most cases, kids have left home. There's the sense of, who am I? What is my purpose? What's happening in my body? It kind of all comes back to me. So I feel like we need to be reframing this concept of menopause as being an aging, degrading process into a time of reclaiming ourselves emotionally, physically, and flying, really.